Hello, I am the Script Doctor, and welcome to the channel. There have been a lot of bad episodes of Star Trek Discovery. This one is no different. Narratively speaking, each episode feels like a kitbash of a few different stories. It functions similar to a Family Guy episode. The first act sets up one story, and then a minor piece of information changes the direction to a brand new story that starts halfway into the episode. This week, the Discovery finally reunites with the Federation and gets their first assignment. It also says goodbye to a character we barely knew. But does this character get the center stage of the episode and a beautiful send-off? Of course not, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Grab a seat, viewers, get comfortable, because we're going to take a closer look at Episode 5 of Star Trek Discovery, Die Trying. We open with Saru doing a captain's log where he acknowledges that the Federation and Starfleet are separate entities, which is correct, but makes an odd claim that they must now abide together, which is something Starfleet and the Federation has done since its formation. Yet Saru treats this relationship as a new idea. Burnham joins Saru in a corridor staring out the window, updating him with all the ship's logs collected and ready to be handed over to Starfleet. Somehow the conversation is steered towards Burnham trying to find her mother. It's not relevant to the actual situation ahead of them, but it's thrown in there to remind us that Burnham has a personal goal that she's going to bring up but make no effort to achieve. At least, not for a few more episodes, I suspect. And perhaps Burnham's mother will be that mid-season distraction story that I predicted earlier in my coverage of this series. Something that will sidestep what appears to be the overarching goal of this season of restoring the Federation to its former glory. On the bridge, Detmer informs the crew that they have arrived, and we see that the Federation headquarters hides themselves in some sort of distortion field. But we can't get into why that is. The Federation is expecting Discovery. Ah! It's destroying us! Full reverse! Full reverse! Ah, if only. Nope, it's just a harmless field. If ships or other objects floating in space can penetrate it this easily, what is even the point of having the field to begin with? Should there not be a dockmaster opening up a channel and granting access to Discovery to proceed? There doesn't even appear to be defensive measures in place either. So a fleet of ships could easily ambush this mobile base and do some considerable damage before anyone inside could respond. What they find beyond the field barrier are a number of ships sending some type of energy through a tether to a main hub in the middle. This hub projects the distortion field. But I am still at a loss for its purpose. Why are they only in space and not on a planet with access to resources and natural atmosphere? Are they a floating headquarters? If so, why? What circumstances are there for this to be the case?
It just raises too many questions.
The Discovery crew gets giddy, relieved, and borderline speechless at the new ships they are seeing. Burnham deduces that the ship's energy tether is powering the distortion field. Lieutenant Nilsson, that's the attractive blonde officer that's been getting some more screen time and B-roll shots thrown into each episode, remarks on hulls made of neutronium alloy. Tilly chimes in with detecting ships with organic hulls or holographic containment walls. All very interesting ideas to have in the future. But really, this is all just superficial references. Each aspect they are mentioning would have a full episode dedicated to exploring this technology, like quantum slipstream, transwarp conduits, and the new warp build calculations like in the episode Where No One Has Gone Before. In other words, we're seeing missed opportunities discarded as quickly as they are dealt. I think starships that have options for holographic configuration would be a cool idea that could fit in line with 32nd century technology. Imagine the possibilities. Each ship has something similar to a car's chassis, a safe and reliable area that is consistent between configurations, such as engineering, bridge, medical, and crew quarters. Then there are holographic emitters that build additional decks, stations, and defenses tailored to whatever mission or situation they encounter. That's a pretty amazing concept. Too bad that's not something we'll see explored in Star Trek Discovery. Instead, we get glimpses of a USS Voyager J and a USS Nog.
Detached nacelles? Where do they even put the warp core?
Wow, Detmer, I would suspect the warp core would be in the ship, or in a detached module like the nacelles. Why is this even a question? Does no one in Starfleet understand the concept of deductive reasoning? They are 931 years in the future. There should be numerous technologies unfamiliar to them. It also stands that if you see a ship with detached nacelles, and they're not floating away but resting in place, then perhaps there's something keeping them there that doesn't require a physical pylon traditionally seen on starships. As for how plasma reaches the nacelles, perhaps it's done through rapid transporter systems. Who knows? Not the writers, that's for sure. They just care more about it looking cool instead of thinking that, hey, this might be stupid. The crew continues to admire other starships, and I was half expecting to see a Discovery take on this scene from lower decks. Saru requests the communications officer to hail the Federation and announce that they're reporting for duty. There's no holographic or view screen communications. Everything is done through text transmissions for Bryce to convey to the captain and crew. He informs us that headquarters is taking remote control of the ship and requests Saru, Burnham, and Adira Tal to prepare for transport. Burnham, Saru, and Adira gather together, and everyone is all smiles as they are beamed away. They're gone. Detmer, quickly, engage the spore drive and get us as far away from those idiots as possible. Aboard Federation headquarters, Saru and cohorts meet Charles Vance, the Commander-in-Chief of Starfleet, and his Chief of Security, Lieutenant Willa. There's some idle chit-chat between each other. Saru is astonished and proud to learn that his home planet has joined the Federation. We get some further exposition about the alliance between the Andorians and Orions. They are referred to as the Emerald Chain, and that their leader is getting more brazen. I suppose this is the galaxy's main antagonist of the series, or just a red herring. Either way, it only took 5 episodes to get a hint of that so far. Vance approaches Adira remarking that she was once Senatal. In a wonderful display of logic, he informs Adira that he knew Senatal, but not her, and to not expect the same level of friendship just because she carries the same symbiont. Vance orders Adira out of the episode under the claim of a medical exam, so that's one less character to worry about for this story. Before we even get to Saru and Burnham, Vance is interrupted again with an emergency regarding Keeley refugees. Their condition is getting worse and sickbay is overflowing. Wow! In the 32nd century, medical science hasn't advanced enough to find more efficient means of suspended animation or stasis in the case of medical emergencies or triage. That's very strange. We do get a look at their sickbay and see that it is a tiny room that could hold 9 patients at most. From this shot here, I would hardly call that overflowing. I would say that by the looks of things, it's rather modest, and the only real issue is the specific condition of each patient. The good news is that the doctors have diagnosed the problem. They ate some type of poison, but they can't isolate it to create a treatment. Burnham offers the discovery to help trace back the Keeley steps, but Vance shuts her down, stating that they're in the process of doing that also. Saru tries to justify Burnham's intrusion by being anxious to help the Federation. Vance is appreciative of the intent, but he's very much all business and braces them for a debrief of their crew. In the briefing, Burnham updates the Admiral regarding their time travel as a holographic doctor intrudes on her and Saru's personal space. It's intended to be funny, but clearly isn't because it's a low-hanging fruit joke. Have a doctor get a little too close to their patients while they're in the middle of an important meeting or conversation. We saw this in Into Darkness, and now the same joke is being repeated in Discovery. It's a moment that repeats what we've seen and been told over the last 4 episodes. It doesn't need to be here. We can skip that first half and get right into Saru remarking that their journey to the future was a one-way trip, and now they can update us with the sphere data. After the holographic doctor is done with his examination, Vance dismisses him and they continue the briefing. Great! A character that is introduced only to be sent away. How useful and important. Good thing they put him in this scene. Saru inquires about the status of the Federation, with Vance able to confirm 38 worlds, a little more than 10% of what they were at their peak. We learned that for some reason subspace relays are also down because of the burn. I don't know why that is. Subspace relays don't need to travel at warp speed. Why would they need a warp core? That seems like an awful lot of energy for something that is the equivalent of a cell phone tower on Earth. Vance informs us that as far as their records are concerned, the USS Discovery was destroyed in 2258, and everything about their ship and its spore drive are not on record. Saru tries to explain the situation, but Vance states how there is no way for those claims to be corroborated. He updates Saru about the Temporal Cold War, and its end resulting in the outlaw of time travel. He adds that it is to prevent anyone from the past changing the future and vice versa. That's not how time travel works.
But every choice we make allows us to manipulate the future. The future hinges on each of 1,000 choices. Living is making choices.
I mentioned this in the 2nd episode. The past has happened. It impacts the present and future. No one from the past can change the future in as detrimental a way as someone from the future could change the past. The only change someone from the past can make by going to the future is by being absent from the past. And if they don't return to the exact time they left, that will impact the future as well. We learned this in yesterday's Enterprise, which that particular inciting incident is pretty much the same as Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. One ship removed from the past has changed the present, or in this case, the future. There are no further actions Discovery can do in this new present to change the events between the time they left and now. unless somehow Guinan is still alive and is friends with Vance telling him that this is all wrong, and believe me, that would be an awesome idea, and they send Discovery back in time to be destroyed as the history records state, then there isn't really a problem with them here. Burnham argues that Discovery is the reason why life still exists in the 32nd century. She makes that statement with the conviction of an idiot, not recognizing an important fact that Admiral Vance serves up. That even if it were true, it can't yet be proven, and because he's responsible for the safety and security of the Federation and Starfleet, he has to exercise caution, which means he can't take them at their word. He orders Discovery to undergo a refit and a full debrief of the crew, which seems like a good thing, but Saru and Burnham stand from their seats to protest. Why? Why is it a bad thing for them to get updated with history and new tech? When Vance informs them that the Discovery crew will be reassigned, they treat it like parents having their children taken away. It's overly dramatic, but Vance hits them again with a logical point. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, something Burnham didn't teach Spock, thankfully. Vance's actual words aren't nearly as eloquent, but the point remains. On Discovery, Burnham, speaking purely on conjecture, claims that the old Federation wouldn't separate them from each other or transfer them off of the ship given their experience. While the only point she has in her argument is that they can operate the spore drive, that doesn't mean that they can't teach others how to do so as well. So far, Stamets is the only officer that has to stay with Discovery in order for the spore drive to work, but he and Tilly are supposedly working on a way to change that. Burnham is panicked that the crew won't recover if they are pulled apart, and suggests hatching a plan to help the Keeley and prove their crew works better together rather than separated. What I find amusing is that Burnham fails to recognize a huge flaw in this argument. That flaw being that her crew cannot function with other officers outside of Discovery. That's a big issue to address. If these officers can't work together with other officers from other ships on other assignments and are codependent on the Discovery, then we're dealing with a crew that can only be detrimental to Starfleet instead of beneficial. It also shows how much she underestimates her fellow officers, thinking that they cannot function or acclimate to other vessels. This highlights a massive failure, not just with 23rd century Starfleet, but with the command structure of Discovery for not being able to nurture and build the independence of each officer on board their ship. Burnham's entire argument is to prove that the crew needs to stick together, but her reasoning is only proving to me that we need to break them apart so they can get back on track to being useful officers in the fleet. Her suggestion to prove the value of Discovery to Starfleet is to find a cure for the Keeley.
Get our hands on?
Saru catches that method of Burnham's and reminds her that they're not going to burn a bridge with Starfleet and the Federation while it is still being built.
That is a lesson I thought you would have learned by now, Commander.
Damn, Saru, you're not watching this show either? Because if you were, you'd know she'd never learned that lesson because she's never paid a price for her actions. She's always been correct, and sadly, that aspect of this show won't be changing. Saru gathers the crew and updates them on their situation before representatives from Starfleet headquarters debrief and sort out the officers. We jump into a boring montage that repeats story beats from previous seasons via debrief to a hologram before we jump back to Starfleet Command where Burnham makes an argument to help save the Keeley. This scene was just a break so that we can get to Giorgio's debrief by two holograms and David Cronenberg. Giorgio is being intentionally difficult and uses a blinking technique to disable the holograms. It is quite absurd because the writers of this show think holograms are the same as androids. They are not. The scene is working on the premise that the holographic image receives information the same way a computer receives information via keyboard, mouse, or camera. But it doesn't. A hologram is a projection. It can interact with other projections and objects in a space, but there are sensors placed around the location that record and process the actions in the room, and that information is used to dictate the actions of the program and its hologram. Doing things to a hologram projection won't affect the hologram, but tampering with its emitter or sensor network will. So Giorgio blinking at the actual holograms is an empty gesture because the holographic projection is not an input device. It is output only. It's like trying to blink at a computer monitor rapidly to bring about the blue screen of death instead of holding the right control key and then double tapping the scroll lock key at the same time. Don't actually try that unless you are an experienced computer programmer. But Script Doctor, you say? If there are sensors around the room, wouldn't they pick up that blinking anyway? I would say sure. And if that is the case, why would Giorgio be specifically directing her blinking to each hologram if they are getting the same information? It is because in this case, the writing and direction of the scene is conveying that the holograms are input devices as well as projections, which I have proven is not the case. This attempt at making Giorgio far more of a dangerous character is a diabolus ex machina, a dramatic necessity to convey danger. but it doesn't work when the target audience knows more about the genre and brand of the series than the writers. It's a misunderstanding of the premise of a logic loop to cause an artificial intelligence to self-destruct or overload. If these two interrogators were androids and not holograms, then I could actually buy into this, because androids can be autonomous and their bodies are designed to receive input. It would have better fit Star Trek at least. After the holograms magically destabilize, Cronenberg grabs a seat and continues the debrief himself. Before we can proceed with this new subplot of Giorgio gaining power in the 32nd century, Saru and Burnham identify that the Keeley went to a planet that once had an economy dedicated to enriching unstable metals. Because the process was destroying the environment, their plant life mutated over time due to high levels of ultraviolet B radiation. The holographic doctor suggests a pure sample of the plant that they ingested can be used to screen for the irregularities and create an antidote. Burnham remarks how in the 23rd century there was a seed vault ship that held samples of every plant in the galaxy. Really? Every plant in the galaxy? In the 23rd century, when they had at best only charted around 8% of the Milky Way. How did that happen? Why did she have to say every plant in the galaxy when she could have more accurately said, the Teacoff had a seed vault of all plants within the Federation at that time. As Erna was a member, there should be a pure sample within that vault, assuming it's continued since then. But nope. She claims all seeds from the galaxy, and even my suggestion of a new line isn't 100% better either, because it speaks of a single seed ship vault. And weren't hundreds of ships destroyed because of the burn? Also, what type of multi-planet culture puts all their seeds on one ship, and not have multiple vaults established across all of their planets in a worst-case scenario eventuality? I understand why Earth has the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, but it's not just the one place. There are currently around 1,000 other seed banks and exchanges throughout the world. The fact that this episode is working on the premise of only one ship out of the entire Federation is willfully ignorant. But there is a fix. If, let's say, there were hundreds of Seed Vault ships and after the burn there were only a few left that survived, and their missions were to go from one Federation planet to another to exchange, deposit, and build more backup Seed Vaults, then we have a more believable premise. Luckily, the exact ship that Burnham refers to is still active 930 years later, but it is 5 months away and the Keeley only have a few hours before they perish. Burnham reminds Vance that they can get there and back quickly. Vance orders his officers to get a crew together to use the spore drive, but Burnham urges Vance to let Discovery do the mission instead of wasting time training a new crew how to operate a 1,000-year-old ship. Saru interjects and volunteers to stay behind as collateral. Wow, that's a great use of a captain. Why not have Saru offer Burnham and some of his less essential officers over as collateral instead of himself? A captain needs to be with their ship. But I guess Saru is only the captain in name only because Vance agrees to the conditions and puts a security team on Discovery to observe the crew. But why is this part of the episode? Discovery has finally reunited with Starfleet and the Federation. Shouldn't the episode be focused on what that means? They gave us a logical setup with the crew being separated and debriefed. Should that not be the focus of the story? There is a brand new world that they have connected to, and we get the tiniest of taste of what this place is before they are sent off on a mission. This should have been a very heavy character-driven episode, learning the new ins and outs of Starfleet and how their laws may have changed over the last 900 years. Is there still a need for a prime directive given the weakened state of the Federation? What more can we learn about this Emerald Chain? What caused the Andorians, a founding member of the Federation, to branch off and ally with the Orions? Would the Discovery crew even be able to retain their rank given that they are 900 years out of date? There's so much for them to learn they'd essentially be at best cadets in modern Starfleet. Should we not see them dealing with those circumstances?
It just raises too many questions.
Starfleet and the Federation just gained a new ship with 88 additional officers. It doesn't look like they're growing that fast anyway, so this would be a blessing for them. They also have access to the spore drive, so why isn't this a Stamets-heavy episode about how Starfleet can convert other ships to have spore drive capabilities? It also allows them to explore the problem of navigating the spore drive. Do they genetically modify crew members of each ship the same way Stamets did to himself, or do they work on creating a new interface? This should be essentially a bottle episode exploring all of these questions, but instead Saru loses his command so Burnham and company can go shopping at the Federation Garden Center. The Discovery leaves Starfleet headquarters, and Spore jumps to the Teacoff, which is caught in an ion storm. The Discovery fishes it out with a tractor beam and learns that the crew operating the ship is Barzan, which means we're going to get a little more exposure of Non. No, not that Non. This Non. Burnham gathers Non and Culber as part of her away team and they board the ship. It is covered in wild plant life, which according to Burnham should not be the case. She suspects that the seed vault may have been compromised. Culber notices that a life sign blinked in and out of existence, and it is surmised that the radiation they detected on the ship could be interfering with their instruments. This is an alright setup for a mystery. It's a little too direct with dialogue, but that has more to do with the fact that we're 27 minutes into a 55-minute episode, and the story is only now getting started. We know the crew is a family of 4, 2 kids and their parents, but they aren't around to greet the Discovery team and can't be detected with their tricorders. Instead of forming a search for the crew, Burnham leads her team directly to the seed vault. Why care about finding the crew? After all, it's not like they know how to operate this ship or find the things they need or answer questions as to why it's on emergency power. I know they're trying to make Burnham focus on the mission of getting the seeds that will save the Keeley, but to not have any curiosity about the crew is not Starfleet behavior. In fact, much of this is outside of Starfleet protocol because the Discovery at no point hailed the Teacoff before boarding. Owasukan gave details of the ship. It's running on auxiliary power, there's strange radiation interfering with their scans, and the warp drive is offline. These are all readings of the ship while it is still in the ion storm. Once they pull the ship out of the storm, they make no effort to contact the ship or see if the ship's experienced any changes now that it's free of the effects of the ion storm. Usually there would be a hail, and if the crew is incapacitated or the communication systems are damaged, there would be no response. That would be followed by a scan for life signs. From there, a decision to board the ship would be made. But Burnham shows up, pulls the Teacoff out of the storm, and boards her right away without any assessment update beforehand. Burnham assumes that there may be a medical emergency on the Teacoff, but gave no order to gather information that would confirm such an emergency or give them justification to beam to the ship before attempting to make contact. And with the methodology of boarding the ship unannounced and the intention of breaking into the vault to get seeds they need and return to Starfleet HQ as quickly as possible, the framing of this mission is more like a burglary than a rescue operation. As they get closer to the seed vault, they overhear a holographic recording of the family. The father and daughter are building a house of cards, and the mother is humming a lullaby. Burnham recognizes the lullaby as the same one Adira played. That's an interesting choice. Could this be the other red herring to distract the season until the last few episodes? Time will tell. Non is captivated by this projection, and it is only now that Burnham orders Culber to look for the family while she heads to the vault.
Well, better late than never.
Non goes through the logs and learns that the father is trying to find a cure for something. We can infer that it is something for his family, but also see that he himself is distorted. We don't know if this is an error in the logs or if the recording is accurate and the father is literally pixelating away. Given that Culber mentioned a lifeform blinking in and out of his tricorder, it's probably the pixelating away issue. Culber finds the rest of the family in cryostasis pods, but learns that they are already dead with no way to revive them. Non speculates that is what the father, Dr. Addis, was doing with the seed vault, using those plants to try and find a cure for whatever illness struck his family. Burnham inside the vault attempts to unlock the seeds she needs, but doesn't have the access codes. Before she can contact Discovery, she, I guess, senses a presence and avoids Dr. Addis from attacking her. Dr. Addis is erratic and fights with Burnham before vanishing away. She regroups with the rest of the team and they exchange information. Burnham contacts Tilly, who with Reno and Stamets have completed their radiation scans. Burnham reports her findings and they suspect that Dr. Addis was in mid-transport when the ship was struck by a coronal mass ejection. Tilly refers to it as a massive proton storm, but that isn't quite correct. It's actually magnetized plasma consisting of electrons and protons. It's not really light, but an actual mass. In our own solar system, when a CME happens and is directed towards Earth, it's known as an ICME, and like with solar flares, it can disrupt radio transmissions and cause damage to satellites' electrical transmission facilities and result in long-term power outages. Solar energetic particles can cause particularly strong aurorae in large regions around Earth's magnetic poles. These are also known as the Northern Lights, Aurora Borealis in the Northern Hemisphere, and the Southern Lights, Aurora Australis in the Southern Hemisphere. While these may cause some issues with modern-day technology, high-energy plasma mass expelled from stars would be something to consider with exploratory or transport spaceship design, especially when it comes to a starship that is charged with protecting and transporting valuable seeds. So we're kind of missing something for this concept to be sold as believable. I would suggest that the ion storm we saw a few moments ago contributed to this situation by damaging the ship and weakening the shield's strength and integrity, allowing the CME to do what it did, and they have been trapped inside the storm this entire time. It's an option to get around the idea of a group of engineers designing a ship that would be vulnerable to common space phenomena. After the Discovery crew exchanges some technobabble, They transport Dr. Addis into the seed vaults, thus stabilizing his atoms and keeping him in proper phase. Dr. Addis is unresponsive as Non tries to convince him to give them access to the vault to save other people. Her efforts aren't working, and Dr. Culber suggests that Burnham be the one to shake Dr. Addis out of his immobile state. Because Non and Dr. Addis are the same species, they're personally connected to the tragedy of family loss. From Dr. Culber's perspective, only someone outside of their culture can tell them what they need to hear to help them face reality and move on. What I've noticed is that the writers are giving Culber a bit more to do in this season, and I think they're writing him in the way that they think McCoy was being written in Star Trek. He's volunteering advice to the commanding officer, helping to guide them, but the advice he's giving is not actually helpful to the character, but helpful to the plot. In the previous episode, he suggested Burnham go with Adira to Trill so that she could fix Adira's symbiont problem. It's not driven by character, it's driven by plot to make Burnham the hero of that episode. Here, the same parameters are true. Burnham is being asked to help Dr. Addis come to terms with his family's death because she is the only one that can do it, not Dr. Culber or Non. Only Burnham. Which is not true at all. If anything, Burnham should be the one trying to convince Dr. Addis to help them in failing, and turning to Non asking her to do what is necessary because she can relate and understand their culture. It would also make Burnham look better as a character because she's acknowledging her weaknesses, but also showing foresight in bringing Non along in the first place. And given that this is the last episode we will be seeing of Non, it only makes sense narratively to have her be more of a focus this episode, instead of the one character who has been the sole focus of 99% of the episodes that have been released thus far. Burnham steps in and gives a very straightforward speech that convinces Dr. Addis to unlock the vault for them. They get the seeds and are ready to leave, but Dr. Addis doesn't want to go. He's willing to die along with his family. Culber thinks this is a bad idea, as the ship is an archive of Federation knowledge and is incredibly important and needs to be tended to. Burnham also doesn't like the idea of letting Dr. Addis die and leaving the ship without a crew, so Non offers to stay and continue the Teacoff's mission. Non wants to do this for Arium and also make sure Dr. Addis and his family get a proper burial on her home world. Non makes her goodbye speech about what Burnham said at Arium's funeral and encourages Burnham to keep bringing out the best in people. Burnham accepts Non's offer and returns to Discovery. But wait a moment, didn't Burnham argue with Saru that separating the crew would be bad for them? What if there is someone aboard Discovery that depended on Non as Burnham suggested earlier? This directly contradicts Burnham's earlier beliefs by allowing Non to leave Discovery. And it's not used as a story element to prove Burnham's earlier assessment of the crew incorrect, it's outright ignored. Also, I'm pretty sure the Teacoff is still in need of repairs after their encounter with the Ion Storm and the CME, so should they not leave behind an engineering team to fix up the ship, and they can come pick them up after dropping off the seeds at Starfleet headquarters? I guess not. Well, they leave Non behind to fix the ship on her own, and Admiral Vance is satisfied with Discovery's mission. He informs Saru that given the current circumstances, Starfleet doesn't have the luxury of exploratory 5-year missions anymore. Saru piggybacks off this statement to tell Vance about Earth's Renaissance period, specifically Giotto. He remarks how Giotto's introduction of the 3-point perspective in art inspired people and led to the changing of society. I'm going to get back to this point in a moment, but let's finish up the review. Vance takes Saru's point, and with Burnham arguing again to keep the Discovery crew together, Vance agrees to the terms, which is odd because from his perspective this shouldn't be a negotiation. If anything, he should be saying that Discovery will begin acclimating to this time while sharing details and procedures regarding the spore drive to be used on other ships. Maybe that order will come in another episode. Until then, Dr. Culber administers his cure to the Killy, and Lieutenant Willa updates Burnham regarding the lullaby she heard. Apparently it is a common song. Burnham doesn't understand how that can be, as Trill, Federation headquarters, and Barzan are a great distance away. Willa states that maybe it is something that got into the ether. Or maybe it was a popular lullaby over 400 years ago before the burn, and it has remained in countless cultures ever since. Stories and songs have that ability. There may be subtle changes as the years pass, but it's not unheard of for things of that nature to stand the test of time. But given that these writers aren't very good and rarely does anyone remember what they worked on before because it was trash, they find it difficult to believe that a song or story can be remembered or passed down beyond 5 years. Burnham returns to Discovery to talk to Giorgio about the music, only to find her in a catatonic state. It takes a moment for Giorgio to snap out of her trance and walk away. This may be to build up on a scene I skipped over earlier. In it, Cronenberg and Giorgio have a back and forth about their admiration of the Terran Empire. Cronenberg hands over his badge to Giorgio, and she crushes it to pieces under her boot. I'm surprised how easily that was accomplished. One would think that by the year 3000, the durability of hardware would be vastly superior to today.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
This conversation is to set up either a third red herring, that being some type of authority above the Federation, or a red herring that links the Lullaby and the Admiral chain together to be the ultimate threat of this season.
Bum bum bum.
We end the episode in the same corridor that it started, with Saru and Burnham looking out on the Federation ships and wondering if this place is starting to feel like home. Saru, in that exchange, requests that Burnham start thinking before she speaks, or it will have negative effects on both of them. Obviously more so on Saru for having a first officer that doesn't respect the chain of command or the values of Starfleet. So clearly Burnham is going to backtrack on that at the first opportunity. Saru closes out the scene that while he doesn't know what is in store for them, for the first time he is sure that they are looking up. Which takes me back to his speech about Kyoto and the Renaissance. And I'm not blind to what is being implied with this moment, and I'm sure you watching this video is not blind to it either. The writers of Star Trek Discovery are trying to argue that their show will take humanity, at this time in the 21st century, out of its own version of what they see as Dark Ages and inspire us to look up. Well, the intent may be there, but the understanding and execution of what inspires people is not. Star Trek, this one, with these characters, inspired people. They told morality plays, focused on character, and broke down current social issues to their base conflicts and presented them in a more universal and timeless fashion so as not to be dated. If there was any preaching in that series, it was done through an abstract form regarding core values such as freedom, compassion, love, and earning respect. This show gave those who watched a new perspective on the world and themselves and told a story of maturity for our species, a story where humanity grew beyond our petty differences and issues and found value in individuality, teamwork, and curiosity. It made an argument in each and every episode that we have to be our best selves, constantly growing and learning in order to help ourselves and each other, that the fact that we each have differences is something common to us all. We don't get that today with Star Trek Discovery. What we get is a superficial adaptation of a savior story, with Michael Burnham being the one to solve every problem she's faced, where she relies on no one, but is relied upon by everyone. There's nothing inspirational about seeing a world where everyone is not as good as or as capable as the main character. She's placed on a pedestal so high up no one else can reach, and given how she behaves and what she does up there, who would want to reach for that in the first place? That is just one of many problems with Star Trek Discovery, and I am sure many more will surface as the series continues. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have anything to add to this episode, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and never forget, it all starts with the script.